Welcome back, everybody. Today's Q&A is brought to you by the color Desert Yellow, apparently. Thank you so much for all the questions this week. I've had a pretty crazy week gigging and doing a bunch of other stuff. My wife was in hospital yesterday because one of the cats bit her on the hand and it got infected, but she's doing great now. She's back home. I'm back home. I still haven't showered after the last gig, which was up near Marble Bar. For those of you familiar with Western Australia, it's kind of infamous for being the hottest town in Australia, and believe me, it was hot. And believe me, I stink right now, so be thankful that smell-o-vision does not exist yet. But if you've got questions for next week, as always, get them in the comments. I would love to answer your questions, and let's get into this week's questions. All right, the reason I've got this guitar out, username Who's Your Daddy, great username by the way. I always laugh when I see that one and the way that it is spelt. This is a 1990 RG550. It's basically a gem on a budget with the most outrageous guitar color ever. I love this desert yellow. The only thing I've done is change the pickups. There's a Duncan Custom in the bridge, and there's a Damasio liquefier in the neck. If I want to do Vi, Nuno, Paul Gilbert, that whole era of tones, this guitar kind of just nails it. And, you know, I'm not a massive locking trem player, but there is a very particular feel that these guitars have because of the floating trem, and I think it's a big part of that sound as well. So this is what it sounds like. And the strings on this are really old, so it's already going out of tune. I really need to give this guitar a bit of TLC, but there you go. The RG550, really, really great guitars. I always enjoy playing this one, just for the sheer fact that I can get super indulgent with all those kind of 80s riffs and licks, and it feels great and it sounds great. Are there any particular software programs, preferably cheap, that are great for just dialing up song-based presets to jam along with? I did a demo of their latest bias effects a couple of months ago, and I know that their whole thing is geared towards that. I believe they have a new app or program kind of based around song-specific presets and learning. So that would probably be the place where I start. I know they have an iPad app as well, which is pretty handy if you've got a little interface to use that. There are also a bunch of free software plugins. If you go to the Plague Side Studios channel, he just did a video about free metal VSTs, and there's some really, really great stuff on there. Ryan's channel is such an amazing resource, and he's far more keyed into the plugin world than I am, because I just spend so much time noodling with the old Axe effects these days, I should say, that I kind of haven't been keeping on top of all the stuff that's been coming out, which I want to rectify next year and sort of, you know, do my best to offer a more balanced palette. But personally, at home, I use the Axe effects for just about everything. And part of the fun, I think, is trying to create your own sounds. And you can learn a lot about creating your own sound by reverse engineering other tones. And there are so many great guitar plugins out there at the moment. Oh man, I'm tired. Can you tell? That, you know, if you want to go down that route and really create your own tones, there's a bunch of stuff. If you just want to plug in and play, like I said, the bias thing is well worth checking out. That's all I've tried, but I know there are a bunch of other brands out there doing great stuff. So we talked about monitors last week, and I got a question about Yamaha HS8s HS8s and why I went with the Adams over something like the Yamahas. Personally, I don't have a lot of experience with those particular monitors, but I know that like a lot of people really, really like them, and they're meant to be pretty good for the money. I think it's the old NS10s, like a must-have for a lot of people, because the old saying is that if you can get something to sound good on those, they're going to sound good on everything else. And the reality is that I just bought the Adams because my buddy Troy Nababan, who has produced and recorded all the Ragdoll stuff, great set of ears on old mate Troy, great player as well. He's just one of those guys, and a great singer, and a great bass player. So some people just have it all, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, he was using Adams, and when I said, what monitors should I buy? He was like, buy these. So I did that, and I have been happy ever since. I personally haven't tried the HS8s. Monitors are one of these things where I would love to go down that rabbit hole, but it is very, very expensive. So I'm super happy with the Adams. I've had them for years, and I can't see myself replacing them anytime soon. As for the HS8s, I don't know, try them out. Like I said last week, the best thing to do is take your rig in somewhere and try them out and see if they work for your needs and your specifications. This is a question that I feel like I've answered before, but for people who just want to buy something like an Axe FX3 and only make simple patches like amp, cab, maybe a reverb, delay, and a drive pedal, should you be worried about getting a piece of gear like that and, you know, not using it to its full extent? And I think one of the things that people talk about a lot, especially on forums and the internet, and kind of like misplace the value of a product like the Axe FX, is just looking at the specs and just looking at the power. In my opinion, you should be looking at, like, is it going to satisfy you sufficiently, and is it going to be good value for what you need? So for something that I need, the Axe FX like absolutely satisfies my demand for it, even though most of the patches that I actually gig, and certainly the patches that I record with, normally only have a handful of blocks. Like when I'm recording guitars with this, I literally just use an amp and a cab pretty much all the time. If I'm going to add some wacky effects, I'll put a rotary speaker or a delay in there and cut a track with that. But so much stuff happens in a recording in post that I much prefer just cutting the driest, rawest tones possible. And then to play live, I basically take those patches and I'll add a little bit of room ambience. I'll add a delay because I like a lead delay and I like a dotted eighth rhythmic delay, and I'll add a wah, and, you know, maybe if it's like a really specific gig that I'm doing, you know, if there's a chorus or it needs a phaser or it needs some kind of special effect, I'll add that in there. But for my ragdoll patches, it's all pretty straightforward, really. So, and it totally satisfies me. If I want to do totally over the top, you know, patches with like 2 reverbs and 4 delays and that kind of thing, I've also got that option in there. But if you just want to play guitar, just treat this like an amplifier. You know, no one would go, oh, you know, a JTM 45, I'm only going to play clean on it. Is that good value? It's like, ultimately you would buy an amp like that because it's going to give you a tone that you really like. Or you're never going to sort of buy, you know, a tube screamer and go, oh, you know, I really wish this thing could do reverb or delay. Are you going to buy it because it, you know, fulfills that very specific need in your rig, and it's going to satisfy you for that particular need in your rig? So the way this thing sounds, you know, I'm always raving about it, but it really, really is incredible how good something like the Axe FX3 sounds. And if you just want great direct amp and cab sounds, it's phenomenal. If you want to build super elaborate presets, it's great. If you just want to play your acoustic guitar through it with a little bit of beautiful shimmer reverb, you can do that as well. There's no rules in terms of how much of the power you have to use. It's just all about satisfying your needs as a player. I want to give a quick shout out to the user Crush Grooven. He's got some paralysis and an infection, and he said that he doesn't want any sympathy, but man, you know, I really, really have to offer you my good wishes and condolences. That totally sucks. I hope you're in and out of hospital as quickly as possible. And he asked a question about Sepultura and whether I would consider doing a video about some of those riffs and some of those tones. And dude, let's put that onto the list of videos that I want to do. I would love to do that. They are, in my opinion, probably one of the more important modern well, I'd say modern, but like out of those bands that kind of emerged out of the 80s and the 90s. They're a super, super important band. And, you know, the way they were able to work, you know, I'm just preaching the usual thing about Sepultura here, but, you know, it really is an amazing thing how they kind of brought in world music influences into metal and still managed to just be a great straight up thrash band at the same time. And they're a band that I think just really understands groove and intensity, and the things that make, well, certainly the reasons I like metal and rock is like that kind of thing that just makes you want to jump up and down, and they're a really great band for that. So I'm going to add that to my list of videos to do. Maybe we'll do a 5 killer riffs at some point if I can wrap my head around some of their riffs. And again, wishing you a very speedy recovery, mate. Somebody asked if I could shred on a bass 6. I've actually never played a bass 6, but they've always intrigued me. Same thing as like a baritone guitar. They're on that spectrum from a normal 6-string guitar. You got your baritone and then you got your bass 6. So I don't even know if I can shred on a 4-string bass. But anyway, here's my jazz bass and here's some shred. That was pretty terrible, hey. How do I visualize the fretboard? This is going to be a very abbreviated version of this answer, but this is the sort of thing that I want to make some content about going forward with the channel and try to balance out the focus on gear and tone and actually talk a little bit about playing. I've been playing guitar for so long now that this isn't a conscious thing anymore. I think it's just kind of hardwired and it's more like a reflex for me, but my brain's kind of wired to think about intervals. So if I'm playing in the key of A, which isn't necessarily my favorite key, but it's kind of one of my default keys. The first thing I would look for are all the A notes, and it makes quite a fun little exercise. Like, and then from there, let's say I was focusing on this particular little pocket. I always try to think about little clusters of notes. Say around this A here, 7th fret of the D string. My defaults are to know where there's a lower octave, so, and a higher octave. Just for example, then the next interval I always try to keep in mind is where the 5th is. And then they kind of form the basis of like how I think about what I'm doing, because just about everything you play over, they're the safest notes. The root and the 5th are really stable. And then, you know, if you were playing over just like a static A power chord, not necessarily major or minor, you can use those notes as like a framework. Like let's say I take these, this line, this diagonal thing here. I know that I can pretty much do stuff and land on any of those notes and it's going to work, whether it's simple stuff like, or whether it's just like as whacked out as possible. Now that's maybe not the best example because it's not necessarily in a context of playing over a chord progression, but if you know where your root notes are and you know where your 5ths are, then everything else kind of follows. And a great exercise would be take a note and then go, okay, cool. How many different ways can I play, say, the minor 3rd? And just knowing where those notes are. And honestly, I often just think about those. And if I'm going for a particular melodic thing, then I might think of like your 3-note per string major scales. If I was playing like a blues thing, then I'll think about the blues scale. But I think this topic certainly deserves a far more expanded, probably series of videos on it. So if that's something you guys would like to hear, please let me know in the comments. Next gig, if you're in the wonderful town of Perth, we're doing a show the 20th of December at the Cornerstone Ale House. It's really close to my house. And then on the 21st, we're at Paddy Malone's at Joondalup. They're both kind of small little pub shows where we will mostly be playing other people's music. But of course, all these shows, we love bussing out our own tunes. So if you are going to come down, please request that we play a bunch of our own stuff, because I would much rather be playing ragdoll songs than just about anything else, except for like Michael McDonald and Christopher Cross songs. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I was a little bit kind of tongue-tied in some of these, and as you can see, I look wrecked, so I'm going to go and get some rest. Please, as always, let me know if there's anything you would like me to answer. Just get a comment in. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend wherever you are around the world. Thanks as always for tuning in. I appreciate the support, and I will see you guys next time.